So yesterday I introduced what is biology and what is science, and I'm just finishing up this lecture before I move on to Chapter 2's lecture. And one of the things I did is I talked about the many different ways that you can think about biology. And I noted that biology can be looked at hierarchically. That is, there are a lot of different layers to biology. And I've got two summary slides of what these layers look like, and this is one of them. The slides actually look nothing like each other. And in part, that's because one is looking at the smaller things below the level of the organism, and the other slide's looking at bigger things above the level of the organism. So this is below the level of the organism. And so I'm starting out very small. So the realm of physics is subatomic particles and atoms and other things. And when you start talking about the interactions of atoms, how they form into molecules, compounds, that's chemistry. If you start thinking about the chemistry of living things, now we're talking about biochemistry. Biochemistry merges into something called cell biology, which is understanding how cells work, looking at cells literally as little organic machines and how they function. So this multi-molecular complexes, taking these macromolecules, which will be covered, I believe, in Chapter 3, and then combining these many molecules, small molecules and big, into these multi-molecular machines or multi-molecular complexes. That's the purview of cell biology. Organelles are units of cells that you can see through a microscope, and they are also little machines, although bigger than multimolecular complexes. These are things like mitochondria and ribosomes, things we'll be talking about when we talk about cell biology. And this starts to merge up to physiology. The physiology is a description of how organisms work, how they function. And in fact, physiology you can understand at the level of cells, which is the basic unit of what an organism is, all the way up to multiple cells together forming into tissues or organs. So physiology, if you took the class called human physiology, for example, what you'd be understanding is a lot of descriptions of how different molecules and different functions go on inside of bodies, and the cellular and molecular and tissue and organ basis of those functions. Once you start getting to anatomy, to tissues and organs, now you're starting to talk about anatomy. And once you start getting to anatomy, you can build yourself all the way up to individual organisms. So starting with the very smallest things in the universe, this is kind of a flow chart taking you up to what an organism is. Not what an organism does, but different ways that you can look at organisms. Different ways you can break them down, different layers. And then this flows into this, which you've seen already. This was presented on during the lectures last week. And this is a very ecological perspective on organisms. So here it's molecular and physiological, cell biology, things like that. But above the level of the organism, now you're starting to talk about, or at or above, ecology. And ecology we can break down into looking at the individual organisms and their physiology and how that allows them to interact with their environments. You can talk about groups of organisms of the same type or populations. You can talk about multiple populations living in the same place or communities. And then you can combine communities, those multiple species, multiple populations, with the parts of environments that are not alive, the abiotic components of environments. And then you have ecosystems, and you can combine together all the world's ecosystems into one giant thing called the biosphere. So you can look at organisms at multiple different layers. One of the things that makes biology so complex is that different people study and understand and have described and have figured out how organisms and biological systems generally function at many different levels. And one of the things that we're going to be doing, if not explicitly, then implicitly in this class, is walking through how to look at organisms at many different levels. We're going to start out at a more biochemical level. We're going to make our way to talking about ecology and different types of organisms, cell biology, genetics. These are all different ways of looking at organisms.